Hi, my name is Luke Yankee. I am a playwright and a director, a producer, a theater professor, and an actor. And today I am going to talk about my play, Marilyn, Mom, and Me, which is about to open at International City Theater in Long Beach. So if you want to hear more about it, listen to this interview. I almost feel like I didn't have a choice in the matter. I mean, of course I did, but my mother was the actress Eileen Heckart, who was in the Theater Hall of Fame and who won an Academy Award for the film Butterflies Are Free, and five Tony nominations, two Emmys, a Golden Globe. And so from the time I was a very little boy, I said, Mommy, I want to do what you do. And at first she said, Oh, honey, no, you don't, because she knew what a tough life it was and tried to discourage me. But once she saw that I was serious about it and that there was no stopping me, she and my father were both very supportive. My obsession with writing really began, I trace it back to when I was a kid. I wrote a piece in grade school that I recently came across about a year or two ago called Wally Waterfall. And it was about this waterfall that was traveling all over the world, trying to meet his perfect lady waterfall and trying to get to Niagara Falls so he could be a part of it. And just, a silly piece of kids writing. But I look back on that and I think, there was something sort of honest and truthful and sweet about that kind of propelled me in a way. And I started out as an actor. I studied acting at Juilliard. I was a member of all of the theatrical unions by the time I was 15. And when I sort of really kind of stumbled into playwriting, I really felt like I was wearing shoes that fit for the first time. And I'm proud of the fact that I have six published plays and a memoir and actually a book on writing called The Art of Writing for the Theater. And I also am the head of playwriting at Cal State Fullerton, and I also teach playwriting at Chapman University. So I am well steeped in the world of the scribes. I think playwriting as a format really is best for me because since I started out as an actor and since my background is very much in the theater, of course, I've written screenplays and television scripts that have won some awards and such. But I feel like the theater is a medium that really, really speaks to me. And there's just something about the immediacy of a live audience, you know? It's with my memoir, Just Outside the Spotlight, I'll get emails and letters from people many, many years afterwards saying how moved they were by it and how much it meant to them. But there's something about the immediacy as a playwright of hearing that audience response. And just all of a sudden, it's like, oh, that line worked. That did get a laugh. Or just hearing the audience fighting back sniffles and sobs if they're moved by what you're writing. And I've been fortunate enough to have had all of those experiences. So I really feel like of all the mediums I write in, that playwriting is the one that is really where my heart lies. The theater is such a unique environment because there is a sense of, well, I think of the storytellers around the fireplace in very, very ancient times, and that ritualistic sense of passing on a story, passing on a legacy, that sort of thing. And I think one has that in the theater in a way that one really doesn't in any other medium. Just Outside the Spotlight was very much a labor of love. And when I was a little boy, I would sit at my mother's feet as she would be entertaining the likes of Mary Tyler Moore or Teresa Wright or Pulitzer Prize winning playwrights like Robert Anderson and Tad Moselle. And I would just soak up all of these stories like a sponge. And it was kind of odd for the adults sometimes. It's like, who's this little boy who's just sitting here hanging on our every word? But that was what I did from a very young age. And I knew my mother would never write a book and had no desire to do so. And her greatest fear was that she thought that one couldn't write a book about a celebrity without it being salacious or without it being mommy dearest. And we did not have that kind of relationship, nor would I have ever written that kind of a book. So the fact that I was able to write this book combining my mother's career and our relationship, and to some extent my career, and the book goes up until my mother's death because it really is her career from my perspective. And from sitting and hearing all these amazing stories over the years, I'm incredibly proud of it. And Mary Tyler Moore wrote the foreword to it. And it really is one of the most satisfying things I've ever done in my life. What I would want the readers to get out of Just Outside the Spotlight is a sense of the up and down career of a character actress, the very specific relationship that my mother and I had. And of course, I talk a lot about that in Marilyn, Mom, and Me as well, which we'll get to, I know. But there, I really, it's a son's love letter to his mother, who happened to be an Academy Award winning actress. I think that's the best way to say it. So, from the time I was very young, when my parents would have parties, or in later years when my brothers and I would have parties, and my mother would sort of start down the path of telling her showbiz tales, which she loved to do. She loved to hold court. If people would say, Eileen, what was it like working with Marilyn Monroe? She would get very quiet and she would get very tight-lipped. And if people pressed the issue and she really started talking about Marilyn, invariably she wound up in tears. And my mother was known for playing these kind of hard-boiled, crusty, tough customers, which was really very much what she was like in many ways. Of course, that was a facade. I mean, she was a jellyfish underneath, if anyone really stood up to her. But she loved to sort of play the kind of brusque, tell them all to go to hell kind of characters. So the fact that she would burst into tears every time she talked about Marilyn Monroe up until the day she died was really profound to me. And I knew bits and pieces of her stories about Marilyn and working on Bus Stop, but I really started doing some research on that. And I was directing a production and in Manhattan Beach, and I vowed to myself, I was listening to audiobooks about Marilyn Monroe all summer long, and I vowed to myself as soon as the play was over that I would hole up at my place in Palm Springs in the August heat and would not come out until I had a draft of this play. So I started realizing more and more as I put various pieces together that when Marilyn Monroe shot the film A Bus Stop, where my mother was cast as her best friend, at this point, Marilyn was the biggest star in the world. And she had taken the year off, the year before that, to study in New York with Lee Strasberg at the Actors Studio. And she had become the epitome of the method actress, where one has to feel everything organically. And since my mother was playing her best friend, Marilyn was determined, as the ultimate method actress, to make my mother her best friend. And at first, it made my mother very uncomfortable. And she was thinking, who's this starlet who's kind of glomming onto me and making me feel very uncomfortable? But ultimately, the two of them really bonded through their wounds. And both women were adopted. And as a result of that, among many other things, for all that they both achieved, Marilyn in films and my mother mostly on Broadway, neither one of them ever felt that they truly deserved a place at the table. There was always that sense of the missing piece, always that sense of, I'm not worthy of this. And so in this play, Marilyn, Mom, and Me, the premise that I have set up is that a 40-something Luke learns early on in the play that his mother is terminal with lung cancer, which indeed happened right around the time of my 40th birthday. And so, in order to get at some basic truths about their relationship before his mother dies, he is unraveling her complex relationship with Marilyn Monroe and interviewing her about Marilyn and really getting at the essence of why this woman always made her cry every time she talked about her. So it is a deeply personal play. I am very emotionally exposed in this play because, backtracking a little bit, when I holed up in Palm Springs in the heat of August to write the play, and I said, I'm not going to come out until it's finished. Well, within 3 days, I had a very solid first draft. The play just came pouring out of me. And so I realized so many things about my mother and about her relationship with Marilyn Monroe. So I kind of go back and forth between these two stories. I set out to write a play about my mother and Marilyn, and I wound up writing a play that was every bit as much about my mother and me. So, thus the title Marilyn, Mom, and Me, because ultimately it is a son making peace with his very complex relationship with his mother through the lens of the chaotic world of movie making with one of the biggest stars in the world at that time. I think in some ways it is easier to write a play that is so personal, and in other ways it's more difficult. It's and one of the things that I learned when I wrote the memoir just outside the spotlight, again, because it's a memoir, it's a deeply personal story. There would be times that my husband would get up and I'd be sitting at the computer sobbing, going, nobody's going to give a damn about this. And it's such a personal story. And one of the things I realized, and as the head of playwriting at Cal State Fullerton, this is something I tell to my students, the more personal you make a story, the more universal it becomes. Because when the book came out, and I thought, oh, well, this is such a personal story, it's going to sell about 3 copies. I got letters from people all over the world saying, your relationship with your mother was just like my relationship with my Uncle George or my father-in-law or whatever it was. So, again, because personal emotions are universal. And one of the things I explore in Marilyn, Mom, and Me is that whole sense of these two women, Eileen Heckart and Marilyn Monroe, who on the surface were so totally different. I mean, Marilyn was so fragile and vulnerable, and my mother had the appearance, at least, of being very much a hard-boiled, flinty, tough cookie. But ultimately, they both wanted to be loved. They both wanted to be accepted. And at the time, as I mentioned, Marilyn was one of the biggest stars in the world, and yet she wanted what my mother had. She wanted a stable marriage, she wanted kids, and she wanted to be taken seriously as a legitimate actress. And the year before they shot Bus Stop, my mother had won the Golden Globe and had been nominated for an Academy Award for a film called The Bad Seed, which she had also done on Broadway, where she's playing an alcoholic woman whose son has been murdered. And she only has 8 minutes in the entire film, and it's absolutely gut-wrenching. I mean, and Marilyn strove to be that kind of actress. And I think it's sort of ironic in retrospect that many people do consider Bus Stop one of her best performances, if not her very best performance. And there is an even deeper level of vulnerability in her performance. And she has so many scenes with my mother that I kind of like to think that maybe the chemistry between Marilyn and my mother somehow contributed to that. And another thing I'd like to share about this particular project is, needless to say, there are thousands of things written about Marilyn Monroe. And so people often ask, well, Luke, what are you contributing that is new? Well, there is very little that is written about Marilyn's relationship with another woman. There is so much written about her relationships with JFK and Arthur Miller and her acting teachers, who were female, by the way, and on and on and on. But there really isn't anything else out there, to my knowledge, about another woman who was a contemporary and someone with whom she really bonded on such a deep level, even though it was for a short period of time, as often happens in show business. But it was a connection that really changed my mother's life. And as I explore in the play, ultimately it changed mine as well and helped me to understand my mother on a deeper level. I wanted to direct the world premiere of Marilyn Mom and Me because it is such a personal story. It would be very difficult for me to turn this one over to someone else. I mean, if down the line a major director wants to take it over, we'd have to look at that. But some people believe it is not a good choice for a director to direct his own play because there isn't that sense of objectivity. By the same token, I was a director long before I was a playwright. I've been directing for about 35 years now, if not more. And I know very well how to step into that arena. And there are times, because this is such a deeply personal play, by way of example, Laura Gardner, the brilliant actress who plays Eileen, there are times where I would say, no, Laura, when you're chastising Luke in that scene, you really need to be meaner and you need to be tougher. And she'd be like, really, honey? I'd say, yeah, that's the way it was. And she'd go, okay, here goes. And then she would absolutely blast Luke, the Luke character. And I'd be like, oh God, it's like I'm having an acid flashback to an earlier moment of my life. Yes, that's perfect. That's exactly what it should be. In addition to the actress Laura Gardner, who I just mentioned, the actress I have playing Marilyn is a woman named Alicia Soper, who, I mean, obviously I'm biased, but many people feel she is the best Marilyn Monroe they have ever seen. She plays, she has played Marilyn for so long. And in fact, she is Ryan Murphy's go-to person to play Marilyn. She played Marilyn for him not only in American Horror Story, in a character arc about a story with Marilyn and JFK, but she also played in Feud, the Betty Davis and Joan Crawford story. She had a cameo in that as Marilyn. And she has read every book, seen every video, and she is this stunning looking redhead. But when she puts on the Marilyn wig and the dress and the makeup, it's just like, I mean, it's absolutely the most incredible transformation you have ever seen. The actor playing Luke is a dear friend of mine, an actor named Brian Rohan, who is an Emmy-winning actor who has worked all over the country. He's just absolutely wonderful, and a big challenge for him playing, basically playing his director and playwright. But that's never been an issue, and he handles it beautifully, and he gives a wonderfully sensitive performance. And then there is an actress, Jacqueline Lorraine Schofield, who is playing the dual roles of Ella Fitzgerald and an actress named Rosetta Lenoir, who was very influential in the Black theater community and was really a champion for diversity long before such a thing even really existed. And in fact, Actors Equity has the Rosetta Lenoir Award for diversity, which in casting, which has been given to people like Lin-Manuel Miranda and some amazing people over the years. And so Jacqueline is a marvelous actress who has done things like The Color Purple and Sister Act and really worked all over the country and also In the Heights. And rounding out the cast is Noah Wagner, who plays a variety of different roles. He plays the director of Bus Stop, Joshua Logan. He plays Arthur Miller. He plays several different studio executives and nightclub owners and that sort of thing. And Noah is a wonderful actor. He has had leading roles in two other world premieres of two other Luke Yankee plays. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be working with him again, not to mention an extraordinary team of designers, people who work at South Coast Rep and the Geffen Playhouse and the Hollywood Bowl. I mean, this really is my dream team in every sense of the word. And Karen Desai, the producer at International City Theater, has just helped me put together just an extraordinary team of artists. And I couldn't be more thrilled about this world premiere. What I want the audience to get out of this play, boy, there's a great deal. That's a challenging question. But basically, I want them to see another side of Marilyn because it also shows Marilyn not in any way as a victim. It shows her as a shrewd businesswoman, a brilliant actress, and someone who really understood the camera and her own image in an extraordinary way. I want them to get out of the play the sense of this very complex mother-son relationship. And ultimately, it is, I mean, while I paint Marilyn and Luke and Eileen kind of warts and all, it is by no means an expose. It is by no means a negative story in that sense. It's ultimately a son coming to peace with his mother who's passed away. And while he might not have agreed with some of her choices in parenting at the time, ultimately he learns to see where they were coming from, the good intentions behind them, and he's able to forgive his mother on a deeper level because ultimately forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. This is the most important play I have ever done. And I have been directing plays and writing plays for, oh, more than 40 years now. And this one is so important to me. I mean, it's the pinnacle for me, if you will. And because it's such a deeply personal story, there have been times in rehearsals for the various readings and workshops and other productions where I've actually sort of gone, oh, I really said that, didn't I? I'm being so vulnerable and so exposed in this play. But frankly, I feel like that is where some of the best art comes from. Because, one of the examples that comes to mind, while my story is certainly totally different, is Torch Song Trilogy, where Harvey Fierstein wrote this play about his lover dying of AIDS and about his very tough relationship with his mother and how she could never accept his sexuality. And just ultimately, that was a deeply personal story for Harvey, who actually is a friend of mine. But also, it just, because of the fact that it was such a deeply personal story, it became so universal, as I said before. So I'm really excited after several years of workshops and readings and such, and to really get this play out into the world. It's already won some major playwriting awards, which I'm incredibly proud of. In fact, it won something called the Stanley Award, which is a very big deal in the playwriting world. And a couple of the previous winners include Terrence McNally for his first play called And Things That Go Bump in the Night, which ironically wound up starring my mother on Broadway. And it was also won by Jonathan Larson for a little play called Rent that maybe some of your viewers have heard of. And in fact, when my book, The Art of Writing for the Theater, came out about 2 years ago, Stephen Schwartz was gracious enough to give me a quote for the back cover. And Stephen is not someone I know particularly well, but he's always been very kind and generous with me. And so I happened to mention, thank you for your quote. Oh, and by the way, I recently won the Stanley Award. And he said, holy crap, Luke, you won the Stanley Award? I applied for the Stanley Award years ago and I didn't win it. So this is the man who created Wicked and Godspell and Pippin, and here he is congratulating me on a playwriting award, which was very heady. So I'm really, really excited about Marilyn Mom and Me, and there's several Broadway producers flying in to check it out. There's a lot of interest in it for New York because of the fact that I have these unknown stories about Marilyn Monroe. So we're just holding the happy thought that it has a long and healthy life ahead of it. What I think would surprise an audience member watching this play is really the things one learns about Marilyn Monroe. Because at this stage of the game, people tend to think, what new information could there possibly be about Marilyn Monroe? And in fact, especially I've got people coming from many of the Marilyn Monroe fan clubs, including the LA chapter of the Marilyn Monroe fan club, which is huge, as you might imagine. And also, I've got the president of the German Marilyn Monroe fan club who's flying all the way over to see it. But but I think people, as I said before, they see a side of Marilyn they haven't seen before. They see the side of her that wanted to be a wonderful mother, the side of her that was such a good businesswoman. And because Marilyn didn't have many female friends, because a lot of women were threatened by her because of the blatant sexuality and because of just how men were just so smitten with her. So to see her relationship with another woman who was an equal and who was a peer in many ways, uh, it really gives a unique perspective on her that I think people will appreciate. I want to take this as far as it possibly can. As I mentioned earlier, there is a lot of interest for Broadway, and I have several Broadway producers who will be in attendance. I have also started work on the screenplay. I think it could make a terrific film for Netflix or Amazon Prime or something like that. And I also have one of the producers who is interested. Uh, thinks it would be very successful on Broadway. And I've had a number of major agents and producers and such say the same thing to me. So we are holding the happy thought, and frankly, I feel like ICT and this production is only the beginning. I think people should come and see the world premiere of Marilyn Mom and Me at International City Theater because they will be surprised. Not only will they learn things about Marilyn that they maybe thought they knew but didn't, they will see things about this mother-son relationship with a legendary Broadway actress. They will they will come away fulfilled. They will come away moved. There are many very funny moments in the play as well. And it is a real heartfelt Valentine to the world of movie making, to the theater, to actresses, and to mothers and sons all over the world. I think it will be a very riching and rewarding experience for everyone involved. I love working at International City Theater for several reasons. First of all, I live in Long Beach, so the theater is about a 15-minute commute. And where does one have that anywhere, anywhere, let alone in Southern California? Second of all, Karen Desai is a wonderful producer. She is a wonderful director. She's really good at nurturing artists. And she is very supportive. There was one time in rehearsals for a previous play I directed there, which will remain nameless, where things weren't going so great. And I was having some difficulty with one or two of my actresses. And, and of course, I'm putting on the facade and the brave face and all of that. And Karen just came up to me and touched my arm. And she's like, Luke, are you okay? Is there anything I can do? Which is a wonderful example of just how supportive she is. I'm also, and she assembles such a wonderful group of artists. As I mentioned, these are designers and actors who work all over the country. I also have Don Hill, one of the top stage managers in Southern California, who is the head of stage management at UC Irvine, who is actually taking a sabbatical, and he's also the chair of the department. But he's taking a sabbatical in order to stage manage this show because he believes so much in this project and in this piece and in the future of it. And so it's a wonderful, wonderful place to work. And it's every time I've worked there, it has been just a joy and a delight. I would tell other playwrights, actors, and directors why they need to get involved with International City Theater because, first of all, it's been around for nearly 40 years, which certainly speaks well for not only for the sake of longevity, but for a company that is respected and is appreciated in Southern California. And, you know, no one who works in theater does so for the money. Especially in a regional theater situation like this. Maybe on Broadway, if you're Lin-Manuel Miranda, that's a different kettle of fish. But those, those big shows like Hamilton or Hair or something like that, or Rent, come along maybe once a decade if you're lucky. There's a famous expression, one can't make a living in the theater, but one can make a killing. So those shows are the ones where one makes a killing. But, point being, if one is looking to stretch one's artistic muscles and to really be able to nurture and support the reasons we all work in the theater, ICT is a terrific place to do that. You will feel supported, you will feel taken care of, and your work will be seen by a very receptive audience, and you will be appreciated. Regional theaters on any level, whether it's a place like ICT or uh, Center Theater Group or the Geffen or South Coast Rep, all of these places need support from the community because ticket sales only cover a tiny fraction of production costs. And so it's important to give back to the community. It's important to give back to something that nurtures you, like the theater. And it's very necessary I mean, this isn't the European model where theaters are subsidized by the government. Pardon me. I'm going to say that again. The European model, where theaters are subsidized by the government, is lovely, but that is not the case here. So there are so many statistics on how the arts nurture individuals and nurture students and nurture a community. So, especially since COVID, where audiences are still slowly coming back, still kind of finding their footing. And some people are still nervous about going out in public and that sort of thing, and being in a public place like a sports arena or a theater or something. So it's all the more important in this day and age that we do whatever we can to support our arts institutions and to keep them going and to keep them flourishing. So my book that came out about 2 years ago, called The Art of Writing for the Theater, is an introduction to playwriting, theater criticism, and script analysis. Not necessarily in that order, but because of the fact that I was writing this book during the pandemic, in addition to the how-to sections on each of those areas, I also have interviews with 18 world-class, Pulitzer Prize winning, Tony winning playwrights, lyricists, theater critics, people like Ben Brantley from the New York Times, and the playwright of M. Butterfly, David Henry Hwang, Marcia Norman, who won the Pulitzer Prize for Night Mother, David Lindsay Abaire, who wrote the book and lyrics for Kimberly Akimbo. Just an extraordinary lineup of artists who generously contributed to this book. And every one of those interviews was like a masterclass for me. So I have passed that along through various sections on, for instance, I'll talk about the art of collaboration. And then I'll have a section on Marcia Norman talking about various collaborations she had had over the years and collaborating on writing the book for The Color Purple, the musical. So I feel like it's a really important book. I'm happy to say it's selling very well. And it's gotten, as I mentioned earlier, it's gotten endorsements from everyone like Stephen Schwartz to the Tony-winning actress of Into the Woods, Joanna Gleason, nine-time Tony nominee Scott Ellis, one of the top directors on Broadway, and really just some extraordinary theater artists. And I think there is something in this book for everyone, for both beginning writers, playwrights, lyricists, and critics, and also established people as well. My name is Luke Yankee. Yes, it's my real name. I am a playwright, a director, an actor, a producer, and a theater professor. So Marilyn Mom and Me will be running at International City Theater in Long Beach, California, Previews begin Valentine's Day, February 14th. The opening night is February 16th, and the play will run until March the 3rd. Uh, all performances are at 7:30, and the matinees on Sundays are at 2 p.m., and the play runs Thursday, Friday, and Saturday evenings and Sunday matinees. And you can get tickets through ictlongbeach.org. I look forward to seeing you at the theater.